Coming up on Arirang News, the resurgence of the COVID-19 pandemic in South Korea prompts the Education Ministry to send kids back home to take their classes starting Wednesday. That's causing a lot of concern, especially among high school students who will have to take their college entrance exam later this year. President Moon Jae-in calls on the government to prepare for all possible scenarios when it comes to the pandemic and the economy. Top priorities are protecting people's health and minimizing the economic fallout. And despite the tensions between them, the U.S. and China say they're optimistic about their Phase 1 trade deal and are committed to ensuring its success. This was in a phone call between the two countries' top trade officials. It's 5 o'clock p.m. here in Seoul. Thank you for tuning in to Arirang News. I'm Devin Whiting. South Korea's college entrance exam is exactly 100 days away, but for the students preparing to take the most important test of their lives, the conditions are far from ideal. Due to the recent spike in COVID-19 cases, Seoul's Education Ministry has decided that grade school students will have to stay home and learn remotely. Choi Won-jong has the details.
South Korea's Education Ministry is ordering all students in the metropolitan area to return to full remote learning. With the nation seeing a spike in the number of new COVID-19 cases in Seoul and its surrounding areas, Education Minister Yoo Eun-hae announced on Tuesday that all students in the area will be staying at home and studying online starting Wednesday.
All schools, including kindergartens, elementary schools, middle schools, high schools, and schools for the disabled in Seoul, Gyeonggi-do Province, and Incheon will return to remote learning from August 26th to September 11th.
The announcement came after a series of large cluster infections linked to the Sarangjeil Church, an anti-government rally in Seoul. Over the past 2 weeks, 150 students and 43 teachers and faculty members have tested positive in the greater Seoul area. However, this emergency policy does not apply to high school seniors due to their upcoming National University entrance exam in December. As the exam is just 100 days away, confusion and worry is rampant among students, parents, and teachers.
I've been going back and forth over whether or not to send my children to a private institute over fears that they could fall behind when not at school.
With the recent closure of many private institutes, students are struggling to focus on their studies. The Education Ministry said they will support students and parents and trying to minimize any inconveniences. Choi Won-jong, Arirang News.
South Korea reported nearly 300 cases on Tuesday, mostly in the capital region. To try to avoid having to put the country into lockdown, the government's once again desperately called for the public's cooperation in social distancing. Lee Kyung-eun has the latest.
South Korea reported 280 COVID-19 cases on Tuesday, marking the 12th straight day of cases in the triple digits. It is the first time since the country's first wave in February and March that there have been more than 100 new cases for more than 10 days in a row. The government previously said if the trend continues, it could impose level 3 social distancing measures. Under level 3, the country will basically go into a collective shutdown as it prohibits gatherings of more than 10 people. Already, a number of institutions, including a broadcasting station and City Hall, went into a so-called corona shutdown after seeing cluster infections. And raising the level would cause further damage to the struggling economy and mentally exhausted public. To prevent this from happening, the government has desperately called for the public's cooperation, saying that this week is key to stopping this outbreak.
Social distancing is the only vaccine to prevent the nationwide spread of COVID-19. We are grateful for those who voluntarily take part in virus prevention measures, bearing much inconvenience.
He also called for cooperation from doctors who are set to go on another round of strikes over the government's new medical reform plans.
The government is negotiating with medical workers with sincerity and an open mind to protect the public. I urge doctors to swiftly return to work where patients are waiting for them.
The previous strikes have already caused delays in hospitals run by universities, prompting health authorities raise even more concerns amid the continuing resurgence of COVID-19. Lee Kyung-eun, Arirang News.
South Korean health experts are emphasizing that there are still no proven treatments for COVID-19 other than Remdesivir and Dexamethasone. That's the country's Central Clinical Committee for Emerging Disease Control, noting on Tuesday that there's still no cure. And in terms of vaccines, the committee highlighted that the recent comments by Dr. Anthony Fauci, the top U.S. government disease expert, who warned against using COVID-19 vaccines without proof that they're safe. Some experts are concerned that President Trump might pressure the U.S. Food and Drug Administration to deliver a vaccine prematurely to boost his chances of re-election. The symptoms of COVID-19 are known to vary widely. In the U.S., the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention has identified 11 symptoms ranging from the mild to the severe. And a recent report suggests that those come in a distinct order, which can be helpful in detecting patients faster and more efficiently. Choi Jung-yoon explains.
The length and severity of COVID-19 can vary dramatically, with some people showing no symptoms at all and others suddenly getting very ill.
I couldn't taste or smell anything. I was eating, but it just felt like chewing an eraser. And I suffered from a terrible headache, as if my body and mind had been separated.
Such a wide spectrum of symptoms has been making it difficult for health authorities to characterize the virus, leading to increase in infections with unclear transmission routes as asymptomatic patients spread the virus unknowingly. But a recent study has identified a distinct order of symptoms among nearly 55,000 COVID-19 patients. Most symptomatic patients started out with a fever followed by a cough. After that, they experienced a sore throat or muscle aches, which transformed into nausea or vomiting, then finally diarrhea. COVID-19 also differs from general influenza, where coughs come before a fever. With MERS and SARS, patients started off a fever but tended to develop diarrhea before vomiting. Defining a typical progression of COVID-19 symptoms could help officials prevent the spread of the virus.
Knowing that each illness progresses differently means that doctors can identify sooner whether someone has COVID-19 or another illness. This can help them make better treatment decisions.
Since COVID-19 patients are understood to be most infectious at the start of their illness, a fever, the first symptom, could be effectively used for active screening. However, as symptoms vary by the condition of the immune systems of each patient, thorough testing and monitoring is vital. Choi Jung-yoon, Arirang News.
President Moon Jae-in is calling on the government to prepare for all possible scenarios when it comes to the pandemic and the economy, highlighting the need for exceptional virus prevention and economic revitalization efforts. In a cabinet meeting Tuesday, President Moon said that should strengthened social distancing rules remain in place for a prolonged period of time, it could weigh on an economic recovery in the third quarter.
코로나 확산을 막기 위한 비상한 방역 체계 가동과 함께 고용 안정과 경제 피해 최소화, 민생 안정과 경기 회복을 위한 대책 마련에도 정부 역량을 집중해 주기 바랍니다.
President Moon called for the swift implementation of the government's third extra budget and requested that officials check whether the previous budgets have had a big enough impact. He added that if necessary, he could convene a meeting of the Emergency Economic Council. Moon has chaired 6 sessions of the council since March, where he approved a series of measures, including extra budgets. In today's meeting, the government also passed a number of bills aimed at revitalizing the economy, tax breaks for companies that make investments. Time now for an in-depth look at the market news this afternoon, and for that I'm joined on the line by Mr. Daniel Yu, global strategist at Yuanta Securities. Mr. Yu, thank you as always for coming on.
Thank you very much.
Well, stocks in New York were up overnight with the emergency approval of a new coronavirus treatment and growing hopes for a vaccine. Both the S&P and the Nasdaq at new highs. What's the story in the global markets today?
Yes, as you said, U.S. market continues to do its rise. If you look at Dow Jones, it was up 1.4%. S&P 500 was up 1%. Nasdaq a little bit lagged, but nevertheless, it went up by about 0.6%. Wall Street continues to show very strong move because of these news about the COVID-19 treatments and vaccines news. On Sunday, the U.S. FDA issued an emergency use of authorization of convalescent plasma for hospitalized COVID patients, which is estimated to cut the mortality rate by 35%, which is quite a significant amount. The Trump administration also considering the fast tracking of an experimental vaccine developed in UK for use in the United States. I think this is all linked into the November election that the Trump administration is pushing for the coming out with some kind of the vaccine or the treatments for the COVID-19. If this kind of sentiment continues, we think that the economic recovery of U.S. Could be on the right track, and therefore the equity market could continue to show rising trend at least till the election come through in November.
Well, the main indexes in Korea were up by more than 1% today as well. Were investors taking their cue from Wall Street, or what was driving the trade here in Seoul?
Yes, Korea has shown a very strong movement today. Kospi was up 1.58%. Kosdaq was up another 2.52%. This is a very strong move after quite sizable rise yesterday. The Korea's composite consumer sentiment index showed that it increased to 88.2 in August from 84.2 in the previous month. Clearly, the sentiment seems to be improving despite there's a concern about the COVID-19 patient rising quite rapidly. We are seeing the numbers amounting to as high as 300 per day, but has fallen down to about 260 level. Nevertheless, we didn't see the current condition to worsen that badly, and therefore people are expecting there could be some kind of recovery in terms of the economic conditions. More so, we need to look at the export side. Even though domestic consumption might be negatively affected due to the COVID-19, we think that the export numbers could improve as the UK, US, as well as China do show somewhat of improvement in terms of economic conditions. So if a continuation of manufacturing numbers are going to be better and the economic numbers improving in the third quarter, if that trend continues to the fourth quarter, we think that the Korea's overall Kospi as well as Kosdaq could show a further rise from the current level.
Now, Mr. Yu, oil prices are up a bit because of the two hurricanes in the Gulf of Mexico forcing a shutdown in U.S. production. Tell us about that and your outlook for oil in general.
Yes, if you look at the oil prices on Tuesday, investor weighed output cuts in the U.S. Gulf Coast from the tropical storms Marco and Laura against the doubts over the COVID-19 vaccine. So continue to show that people are quite positive about the overall condition for oil prices at current point in time. The current level is right now around $42.56 per barrel. We think that the range bound could happen anywhere between $40 to $50 based on the demand and supply numbers. And also, we do know that there's a continuation of huge liquidity condition happening in a global scale. But one side of that is that, though, if you look at the currency, dollar index seems to be stabilizing at about 93. But nevertheless, the 93 is still quite a reasonable dollar rate, and that means is that continuation of liquidity condition also would put some positive implication to the oil price. It's not going to be just for the oil price, but we think that this will have some positive implication for gold price as well. So overall trend of the commodity side, inflation numbers coming up a bit and liquidity condition being very strong, we think the price will be showing somewhat a rising trend in the future.
All right, we'll be watching. Thanks so much for joining us today, Mr. Yu. We appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Now, despite the tensions between the U.S. and China, the two sides are saying they're still optimistic about their Phase 1 trade deal, expressing a commitment to ensure its success. The Office of the U.S. Trade Representative says there was a regularly scheduled phone call on Monday between Trade Representative Robert Lighthizer, Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin, and their Chinese counterpart Liu He. They addressed the steps Beijing has taken to make the structural changes called for under the agreement that will ensure greater protection for intellectual property rights and eliminate forced transfers of technology. The call came more than a week after it was originally scheduled, President Trump having effectively canceled it when he lashed out at China over COVID-19. Public transport in Seoul is likely to get a little more expensive next year. The city government and city council are discussing a hike in the basic bus and subway fares of 200 to 300 won. That's about 20 to 30 US cents. They're also looking at raising the surcharge for longer distances from the current 10 cents per 5 kilometers to 20. The proposal would raise fares in the first quarter of 2021. The Seoul subway system has been losing money due to policies such as free rides for senior citizens, and the pandemic's only made the system's financial problems worse. The last hike in fares was in 2015. And that brings us to the end of this newscast. Thank you for watching. More live news coming your way at 7 p.m. Korea time.